Welcome to our Workland School of Education on our beautiful University of Calgary campus. I'm thrilled to announce that we have over 1,100 people registered for tonight's event from over 40 countries and every continent except Antarctica. Maybe they haven't heard about ChatGPT on the research station. Also wanted to acknowledge that some folks here are joining us very late in the evening or very early in the morning, and a special thank you to everyone who's made extra effort to be here with us in real time, whether you're here with us in the room or with us on Zoom. We appreciate you joining us live for this event. Tonight's topic is Don't Fear the Robot, Future Authentic Assessment and Generative Artificial Intelligence. Generative artificial intelligence is now capable of producing outputs that appear to satisfy some learning outcomes. And a recent study claims to have been able to mostly pass the US medical licensing exam using ChatGPT. Educators experimenting with these tools are finding that their assessments are vulnerable to AIgerism. I think that's like plagiarism with AI. We were trying to figure it out, trying to figure out how to say it. We still don't know. It's AI-assisted plagiarism. However, a cheating perspective is not the only way to consider the role of generative artificial intelligence in assessment. It's now my pleasure to invite up our Dean of the Workland School of Education, Dr. Diane Gerlach, who will offer the land acknowledgement.
Welcome to everyone here. It is so good to see so many people here on this beautiful, sunny Calgary day. And truly honored and humbled by the amount of people around the globe who are joining us today. And these topics matter. And so I was reflecting today in terms of the land acknowledgement and thinking about our elders and the Indigenous peoples, both here in Treaty 7 and globally, who have been the guardians of our land, for our Mother Earth, for our mountains, for our clean air, for our clean water, and for our trees. And as we see the pictures and as we've experienced in Calgary, as we have also seen in Australia, the raging wildfires. And we have much to learn from our elders and our Indigenous peoples who were the protectors of Mother Earth. And we need to return back to some of those learnings who have been protecting these lands. So for us here present today in Calgary, I do want to acknowledge the Indigenous peoples of the Treaty 7 region in southern Alberta. For those globally, if you happen to come to Calgary, just east of us is Siksika, and it's almost like the buffalo. And you can also look from the nose of the buffalo to Siksika, that goes down to Pagani and Kainai to the border. In our backyard, we have Tsuut'ina in Calgary. And Stoney Nakoda, if we look west to the mountains, which is Chiniki, Bearspaw, and Goodstoney First Nations. We have so many good Métis people, and I'd like to acknowledge the Métis Nation of Alberta, Region 3, and they are the ones who connect between the Western Indigenous peoples, and we have much to learn from our Métis people as well, how we live together in this journey. So I am very excited. I have been told both by Dr. Sarah Eaton and my lovely organizer Sharon Bola to say, keep your comments short. So I think this is a really exciting. I think how we navigate and negotiate artificial intelligence and ChatGPT is one that is incredibly important. So I'm going to turn it back to Sarah to start the program. So thank you everyone for being here tonight.
So the format for our session tonight is that we're going to have Phil's lecture, Dr. Phil Dawson's lecture, then we'll be followed by Q&A, and we'll have Q&A both from in the room and online. In a case of the emergency, I have to do the housekeeping things now. There are 2 exits behind you, sort of like a flight attendant, right? Each located at the back of the room on either side. You came in through one of those doors. Stay calm if there's a fire alarm. There will be someone directing you to the nearest exit. For those of you joining through the live stream, if you have questions for Dr. Dawson, please email them to workland@ucalgary.ca. Any point during the presentation, we'll be keeping track of them. We'll get to as many of them as we can. The email address, workland ucalgary.ca. Please write that down, or you can click the link located in the reminder to attend that you got today. Tonight's program will be recorded. And undoubtedly, for good or for ill, more than likely, you've all heard something recently about the topic of artificial intelligence, and it seems that not a day goes by without a major headline splashed across the news media on this subject. It's no less a hot topic within our own field as educators wrestle with the implications of artificially intelligence-assisted plagiarism. That's why we say AIgerism, because otherwise we get tripped up on the words. But what are we missing? Another equally important perspective. That's why we have with us tonight Dr. Phillip Dawson to see if we can shift the conversation a little. It's not that the concerns aren't valid, but by focusing exclusively on the potential downsides of this new tech, we miss out on potentially revolutionary new tools. Before tonight's talk, I was given Phil's bio, which I've seen before, and I said, "Are you Professor Phil Dawson or Dr. Phil Dawson?" So he said if we were in Germany, he'd be Professor Dr. Phillip Dawson. He's the co-director of the Center for Research in Assessment and Digital Learning, the acronym is CRADLE, at Deakin University in Melbourne, Australia. Phil has degrees in education, artificial intelligence, and cybersecurity, and he leads CRADLE's work on cheating, academic integrity, and assessment security. I have Phil's book here that I can show you. It's Defending Assessment Security in a Digital World. If you're at U of C, we have a copy in our library. If you're from somewhere else, get your library to get a copy of Phil's book. He's got a bunch of other papers and books and things that he's worked on as well. Phil's work on cheating is part of his broader research assessment, which includes assessment design and feedback. That's one of his areas of specialty. And in his spare time, Phil performs improv comedy and produces the academia-themed comedy show, The Peer Review. Please join me in welcoming Professor Dr. Phillip Dawson.
Wow, thank you so much, Sarah. It is lovely to be here. I really appreciate you and your team doing everything to get us over here. We've just come out of a really intensive couple of days led by Sarah, funded by Shirk. It's been amazing being able to talk through these difficult problems of generative artificial intelligence. Now, the talk is Don't Fear the Robot. I tried to come up with a more contemporary sort of reference. But about as contemporary as I could get was like Not Okay Computer or Techno Nirvana, but I thought let's not just have 90s references. So this is me. There's the book, there's a little plug, there's my Twitter handle, @Phillip Dawson, Phillip with 2 L's. I was once in an online gaming session. My online gaming username is PhilJCool with 2 L's. And someone said, "What's the extra L for? Is it for loser?" Anyway, 2 L's, you'll remember that now. Phil the loser. Okay, I like to start with a little bit of a disclaimer on my talks. So here is the sort of standard Phil disclaimer. Firstly, I'm a standards-based assessment person. If you'd have told me when I was a teenager, you're going to grow up and you're going to research assessment, I would have thought that sounds so boring. But this is me, this is where I'm at. I love assessment. When I say standards-based assessment, I mean that we assess not based on, sorry, I'm just starting timing. Got to time yourself, that's a standard. We assess not based on how well you did relative to your peers. We assess people based on how well they do relative to standards. We have learning outcomes. We have criteria that we assess people against. That's the sort of world that I come from and live in. In Australia, it's the law. The Tertiary Education Quality and Standards Agency has all sorts of legal instruments to make sure universities do that, and if they don't do it, they're not allowed to be a university anymore. I understand that Canada and different parts of the world are at different places with respect to a journey towards standards-based assessment or not. I'd love to have arguments about why that's a good idea or not with you. That'd be heaps of fun, so chuck those questions in. Now, I think that doing this and getting the whole generative AI thing right and other things like academic integrity right matter because assessing learning matters, evidencing learning matters. Why does it matter? Well, we've seen somewhat recently, problems with cheating. These predate the ChatGPT panic. An example is elevator mechanics in Florida cheating on their exams. That's terrifying. If that doesn't terrify you, you must be one of those rare people that gets into the elevator and is like totally okay. They never think this is just going to stall on me and I'm going to get stuck or the elevator will drop. Next time you're having that fear, think about academic integrity. This matters because of one of the big four accounting firms, I believe it was Ernst & Young, getting fined $100 million for people cheating in their ethics exams. So this is not some artificial thing we create within universities to care about this. And this matters for some very real reasons. People might be familiar with the Christchurch earthquake. It's still very big in Australian and New Zealanders' minds. They had a very big tower that collapsed and killed people, and the person who was responsible for that tower, for building it, had a fraudulently obtained degree. So this stuff matters. It's not some sort of nice, airy-fairy academic debate, although I do love those. This matters because it's a matter of life and death. It's a matter of us fulfilling our responsibility to society. So that's where I come to this as an assessment person. Now, I'm really focused there. I'm not focused on broad sociological questions about generative AI. Yes, I agree with you that it produces some horribly biased outputs, and that we should think about the intellectual property implications of how it siphons up data from the web without our permission, but that's not where I'm going to focus today. I'm really focused squarely in that really difficult problem of how do we assess in this new world of generative AI. And also, if you want to be like students will use it for the same reasons they cheat, which is neoliberalism or large class sizes or students as consumers, I'm not going to argue with you there, but that's sort of more on the sociology of education side of things, which is not my jam. I am an assessment nerd. But I don't have an easy fix. So if you came here wanting the easy fix or the solution, I don't have that. That's not me. I think this is hard. This is the hardest problem that I've encountered. I'm interested in long-term approaches rather than short-term hacks. So you remember about 6 months ago, right at the start of this, people were like, yeah, all you've got to do is like set an assessment task that uses things from like 2023 because ChatGPT doesn't know about 2023. And that seemed like really sensible and it worked for like a month or two. And then it found out about 2023. We're not going to try and live there in the quick hacks sort of space. We're going to try to go to some bigger principles. And finally, because I'm just bearing all of this, my mum helped me cheat in grade 4. Now I've announced this on national radio and the people at her retirement home have like given her hell about it. So this is nothing new. Mum's not hearing this for the first time. But the specific topic is of interest because we had to do a poster comparing 2 countries, Australia and some other country, and I chose Canada. So I'm sorry that I don't know as much about the similarities and differences between Australia and Canada as I should, because Mum did most of the assignment for me. However, later in life I discovered I have aphantasia. I have no mind's eye. I can't picture a duck or my children's faces or a sunset or a triangle or anything. And I've come to understand that maybe the assessment, if we'd have known that about me and my capabilities, I might have had some different assessment or something. My assessment record is very spotty. The other reason I mention this is because we should acknowledge that our understandings of assessment, of cheating, of all these things are socially constructed. We're operating in a paradigm that's all about you must do it yourself, and that is the only true thing that works. And this standards-based assessment paradigm that I love so much really is victim to that sort of thinking. And if you want a really good, hard-hitting documentary about how conceptions of cheating are socially constructed, there's an episode of Peppa Pig where Madame Gazelle sets them this task where they have to produce a diorama, and all the children go home and get their parents to do it for them. And, they all accept this. This is all okay. This is kind of the expectation. So anyway, this is me, this is my positioning. Let's get on with it. I got 3 things that I really want you to take from this presentation. If you walk away with these 3 things, that will be wonderful. The first one is that generative artificial intelligence can do a lot of what we currently assess. The second one is that we probably can't and really shouldn't try to ban it. And the third one is that we need assessment to prepare students for their future, not for our past. So let's get into it. There's this pretty scary study. It came out as a preprint earlier on, and I remember reading it and going, ooh, I wonder if this is going to hold up to peer review, because I don't understand the domain of medical education well enough, and it has. ChatGPT was able to perform at around the passing score for a third-year medical student in their exams. That's kind of scary. Now, a caveat on this is that this is ChatGPT's performance in what is a proctored exam. So it's going to be pretty obvious if you're sitting there with ChatGPT, typing away, getting frustrated when it says, I am a large language model, I cannot, blah, blah. You get that as well? Yeah. So it's not a totally authentic scenario, but it happened and it's at that level. And one of my side hobbies is collecting cheating technology and researching that space. And there's a ton of little hidden earpieces you can buy off Amazon that really tiny little things that no one will be able to see that you've got. I can imagine that combined with one of the cool cheating glasses that you can get being used to hook up to ChatGPT, and it's only a matter of time until someone produces that. On the topic of adaptations of ChatGPT for other purposes, I don't know if people have heard of CheggMate. So the site Chegg, which is not a cheating company, Chegg is a textbook rental company. They got an award today for, I forget the exact terminology, but it was something like additional curriculum support product or something, being the best one of those. Chegg's a site where people ask for help, and sometimes when people ask for help, they use that for cheating. I don't think Chegg will get me in trouble for that. Chegg's worth like billions of dollars. So yeah, don't come after me, Chegg. Anyway, they've now got a ChatGPT integration. So it's all of the homework help that they've ever given hooked up into ChatGPT for students to use for homework help. And I think this is probably our future, is specialised models. And I wonder how a specialised model like that would go on this. Or this. This is a recent paper from some Australian researchers around how ChatGPT performs in engineering education. They took 10 different courses, and all of the assessment in those 10 courses, and sort of some of them they couldn't quite upload, so they had to convert pictures into some writing. But a lot of them they were just able to put straight in, and they looked at, if we put this into ChatGPT, what sort of adjustment do we need to do to get a response that's good enough? And a lot of the time, ChatGPT gave them a good enough response to pass those engineering courses. This suggests we are in a moment where we need to do something. Just continuing with the same assessment is not enough. We need to act. And look, just as an aside, even my side hustle of comedy is under threat. I'll try to give you the Jerry Seinfeld read on this one. Yeah? Okay. I'll try to do a Jerry Seinfeld. So I asked ChatGPT for a joke about people using ChatGPT to cheat. And it says, you know, I was thinking about this ChatGPT thing, and it's fascinating how it handles student assignments. I mean, it's like they programmed it with the wrong priorities. You'd think they'd focus on making it an expert in academic writing, but no. Instead, it's more interested in being the master of copying and pasting. It's like they taught it Control-C and Control-V before anything else. So now, when you ask ChatGPT for help with your assignment, you end up with a mishmash of stolen ideas that would make a plagiarist blush. It's a control-fail situation, folks. We're just one upgrade away from a virtual academic genius. Until then, I guess we'll have to settle for ChatGPT, the control-copy comedian. Now, it's okay. It's not great. I didn't get laughs all the way through that. I got like a polite sort of chuckle at the end. So we're relatively safe, us improv people. I do really like a mishmash of stolen ideas that would make a plagiarist blush. That's probably something I'll take and keep with me while blushing. Okay, so I've shown you some things ChatGPT could do, and the key thing to take is that's just what it can do now. The whole field of generative AI is currently the least capable it will ever be. It's going to get better. Assuming society kind of keeps it together, well, and that is an assumption. I saw an eyebrow raise. We're probably going to get more and more sophisticated versions of ChatGPT, tighter integrations with different data sets, and other new models. So we're at this stage of the 2001 A Space Odyssey movie. And I hope it's not as long and boring as 2001. And my parents used to make me watch that every New Year's Eve. That's a weird thing to do to your kids. Now, this GIF comes from someone whose Giphy channel is just the 2001 A Space Odyssey movie turned into GIFs. And you don't lose anything, because it's... Anyway, enough Kubrick bashing. Let's keep going. To take it even further, oh yeah, and Sarah saw me have this slide in another presentation, and she's like, who's that in the picture? It's me. Me and someone else. Does anyone know who that someone else is? No? That's okay. We'll get there. We'll get there. So there's a goal in the field of AI of producing a high-level machine intelligence, which is an AI that's capable of what a professional is capable of in that domain. They've been working on it for ages. In 2016, there's this paper that interviewed a whole bunch of, surveyed a bunch of AI researchers and said, when are we going to get there? When are we going to have this high-level machine intelligence that can do what an engineer could do, or it can do what an accountant could do, or it can do what a historian could do? And the median answer for when is this 90% possible was 2075. I reckon if they did that survey now, it might be a bit sooner than 2075. And the other thing is the field of AI has this goal of satisfying certain Turing tests. Anyone? The person in the picture? Thank you. It is Turing, yeah. That's in Manchester. That's me and Turing. This is a long-standing goal that the field's had, is to produce an AI that's capable of, on its own, completing a college degree. That should terrify all of us. Not only is it like a byproduct of this AI development, it's also an explicit goal. It's one of the measures as to when the field will have achieved its goals. So I hope I've convinced you that Gen AI can do a lot of what we currently assess, and this is only the beginning. When I gave this presentation somewhere else, someone in the audience had this fantastic comment of, it's not a we'll cross that bridge when we come to it, we're already on the bridge. That's where we're at. Now I want to talk about calls to ban it. So when we ban stuff, we set restrictions. A ban is a type of restriction. If I set you a closed book exam, I'm saying you can't bring your books in and have a look at them. If I say you can't use generative AI, that's a restriction. You just can't. Restrictions that don't work are theatre. They're worse than not having a restriction, because those people who kind of play ball with the restriction end up disadvantaged, and those who don't play ball are able to just go and use it. We see this with remote proctored exams. Remote proctored exams are a contentious topic. There are also a litigious group of companies involved in remote proctored exams, so I watch my words carefully. I'll tell you 3 things about remote proctored exams. Firstly, there is good evidence that remote proctored exams, which lock down computers and restrict students and all that, good evidence that they have a deterrent effect. Students score lower grades when they are remote proctored. At least a dozen studies show that. However, there's not really strong evidence that remote proctored exams actually stop people from cheating. When I asked a whole bunch of remote proctored exams companies, hey, can I do a study where I try to cheat in your remote proctored exam? I get to sign the NDA, I get to have the meeting with the people, and in the end, despite them going, oh yeah, we'd love to, they never want to do that study. Now, I do that approach because our legal team at the university said, if you lose your house because of this, we've told you don't do it. So I'm just not going to go there. But some other researchers in the world have gone there, and they have done studies, and they have shown they're able to cheat in remote proctored exams. This shows that to an extent there's a theatre element to it. Now, definitely there's a positive effect from the deterrent effect of remote proctored exams, but there's also concerns that how long-lived can that effect be when students find out that, well, the literature and randos online say you can cheat in remote proctored exams. If we try to ban generative AI, we may end up in a similar situation if we can't enforce those bans. One way to ban is to restrict access. In Australia, we do something like this for contract cheating sites. There's about 200 contract cheating sites, and anyone who knows how many contract cheating sites knows that's like a drop in the ocean. And it doesn't include homework help sites like Chegg. And many institutions block access to those sites. How effective are they? Well, if I said in Australia you can't access a website, how are you going to access that website? VPN, great. That's it. That took us like a fraction of a second to get that answer. And I'm sure other people were thinking it as well. This sort of approach to banning generative AI, it doesn't really work that well. It might have symbolic value, but what does symbolic value even mean here? Detecting generative AI? It's unclear how effective the existing generative AI detectors are. There are claims that are made that they're very effective. Turnitin's one, there was a claim that it was 99% effective, but those claims haven't yet been verified by independent researchers. That's what we need before we put too much trust into these. And again, if anyone runs a generative AI detector and would like to collaborate on a study where we see how effective it is, I'd love to do that. I've done studies like that before on different tools. It's something we need to do before we put too much trust in them. Because there's other claims in the literature, and here I am actually citing a preprint that mathematically in the long run, maybe it's not going to be very possible to do this, because as the large language models get more and more sophisticated, our generative AI detectors have to keep up with that, and it's in the long run not going to be that feasible. If anyone's on Twitter and wants to tweet the preprint, the authors' names are not in my mind right now, so I'd love it if someone on Twitter could do that. Regardless, if you take one thing from this talk, this is like the wake-up moment or the stop thinking about TV show you watched last night. If you take one thing from the talk, don't just upload student work to some random ChatGPT detector. There are big problems with doing this. Firstly, we don't know how effective they are. Secondly, they're not really able to produce evidence of what Kath Ellis would call high probative value, something that will actually convince a decision maker. So you could use one of these tools and it can say, this is 100% ChatGPT. Well, how do you prove that? What's the evidence? What does this 100% mean? But most importantly, students haven't consented to us using their work in that way. And I know there's the moral outrage of, oh no, students are ChatGPTing my assignments, therefore they deserve it or something. They deserve me to upload their assignments. That rests on your being sure that they actually used it. And I think it's bad logic. We don't know, do they hold on to this? Do they sell this data? Do they use it to train their models? Whatever. So if students haven't consented to this, we shouldn't do it. So don't use those random things. Now, if you say, haha, but Phil, Turnitin also uses student data, which is like every time I tweet this sort of thing, someone replies with that, I'll give you the response to that in advance. At my university, at least, students are aware that their stuff's getting uploaded onto Turnitin. The university legal team has looked at the agreement and the privacy policy and the IP policies and all that. With these random tools that people are uploading student assignments to, which includes ChatGPT itself, we don't know what happens to their data and students haven't consented to it. So that's rant over. Okay. We've talked about blocking and we've talked about detecting. Those are not exactly long-term solutions. I really like this LinkedIn post by Jason Lodge, Sarah Howard, and Jacqueline Broadbent. It talks about what's going to work in the short term to address this problem and what's going to work in the long term. And some of the things that work okay in the short term are not great choices for the long term. Ignoring it. Yeah, we're not going to get away with ignoring it. I think that ship has already sailed. Banning it, it's just not going to work in the long term. Invigilating, that's our sort of Commonwealth English term for proctoring. They say where appropriate, and I agree with them. We probably do need to proctor or supervise or invigilate some work that students do into the future. If there are times when we need to see students produce long-form work and we need to know it's definitely them, that's probably turned into a proctored activity. It's unfortunate, I wish it hadn't. Maybe there are other ways we could do a proctored task about the work, such as an interactive oral assessment about the work, which is something we did in computer science for a long time. You know, a student writes some code out of class, we sit down and have a chat with them about their code. That sort of thing's great. Some sort of supervised, invigilated proctor thing might be necessary sometimes. Embracing it, equity issues in the short term, not everyone's going to have access to it all. But in the long term, they take quite an optimistic view, which you'll see I don't totally agree with later on. Designing around it, which is the ChatGPT doesn't know about 2023, not a great choice. Short-term solutions. Rethinking is where they suggest the efforts need to be, which, yeah, in the short term does require time and effort, but in the long term is probably our only way out of it. And that's where I'm going to focus the rest of the talk. Because assessment needs to prepare students for their future, not for our past. And I'm going to use the word validity, and I want you to bear with me. Validity is sometimes used as like a big stick to beat people with. It's referred to as a God term in assessment, you know, something that's super powerful and can overrule any argument. I'm going to go with the most basic version of validity. Are we assessing what we mean to assess? So when I say validity, it's are we assessing what we mean to assess? If I said an assessment task and it's an essay, and what I really want to assess is students' understanding of the first invasion of Australia by English settlers, I'm bundling in outcomes around essay writing with outcomes around the discipline knowledge. And if I don't actually mean to assess both of those things, the validity is under threat. However, if I do mean to assess those things, great. Anytime we add something in that's extraneous, we hurt validity. And I want to tell you that generative AI is a secondary concern to validity. If you leave this and go home and are like, gee, I want to work on validity in assessment, I want to make sure that my tasks actually assess what we mean to assess, the specific outcomes, and I can show how these outcomes are assessed by these tasks, that's great. That matters more than generative AI. We do a pretty poor job of validity in higher education. We tend to focus on reliability, which is really weird. We tend to be like, well, it doesn't matter so much if the task is good and really assesses what we mean to assess, but if this person and this person would give a different mark for the task, then that's a really big problem. That's where we often tend to go to. Now, restrictions that can't be enforced hurt validity. As I said before, if we say you can't use generative AI and some people use it, that's hurting validity. Exclusion hurts validity. If we set an on-campus exam and you can't go to the exam because you've got test anxiety and you're terrified of the exam hall, that hurts validity. Any tasks we set that exclude people hurt validity because the assessment's got to work for everyone. And if you want a good book on that, our centre has an open access book on assessment for inclusion that's published with Routledge. And finally, cheating hurts validity. Someone contract cheats the task, someone manages to use outside resources in a remote proctored exam, that hurts validity. So lots of things hurt validity. But validity is our goal here. As we venture forth into generative AI, we want to make sure we're still able to assess the outcomes we mean to assess. I haven't really mentioned anything moral here because morality around this stuff isn't my bag. You can have your moral views on it, and I'm not here to change those. I don't focus on moral education of students. I focus on the guy who built the tower in Christchurch needed to be able to build that tower. The fact that he fraudulently built it resulted in people dying, and that's a horrible, terrible thing. It's immoral that he cheated, but the effects of the poor assessment validity result in people dying. So, when we think validity, what are we valid to? What are we trying to work for? Do we want assessment that represents the world outside of education? I'd like to think, yeah, we do. And that's been the push for authentic assessment. Now, authentic assessment aims to improve validity by representing where people are going to go. But a key thing to remember is it's not an anti-cheating panacea. There was some really simplistic dialogue during the pandemic, which is still going, about, let's set authentic assessment tasks and then people can't contract cheat them. Kath Ellis and her colleagues went and looked at it. They went and looked at heaps of contract cheating and found heaps of contract cheating is authentic assessment. So don't think setting authentic assessment is going to solve problems in some magical way. But it may help to sort of improve validity, and we'll go through how it can address the generative AI. When I say authentic assessment, I build on this framework by Veronica Villarroel and colleagues. Sorry, my Spanish, Australians don't pronounce Spanish surnames that well, and I'm sorry. Villarroel, I'm looking at Sarah, it's okay. Their framework talks about 3 key components to authentic assessment. Realism, does it represent what's in the real world? Cognitive challenge, does it have those higher order challenging things to it that are in the real world of work? And evaluative judgment, does it involve people making decisions about the quality of work? These were identified from a systematic review of the literature on authentic assessment as the things that really matter in authentic assessment. The things that the literature seems to really say are prominent there. But what about the future? When we talk authentic assessment, it's often a focus on we need to prepare people for the real world, but what about the world of the future? There's an assumption that we prepare students for now and that's going to be okay. The world our students will go into with this pace of change around generative AI may be quite different. What about the near and distant future? In this book, in the concluding chapter, we propose this idea of future authentic assessment. So assessment that might represent the future, which is going to be this world of generative AI. Assessment that faithfully represents not just the current realities of the discipline in practice, but the likely future realities. We need this because our assessment needs to be valid for where people are going to go, not where we have been. We had realism in the framework, and in future authentic assessment we have future realism, which really breaks down into a few things. The tasks, we need to be setting tasks for students that aren't the tasks of now, they are the tasks of some future, some imagined future for them. We need to think about the physical context. What are the tools they will have access to? Where will they do this work? What are the social contexts? Who will they do this work with? And you might have thought, yeah, but how am I going to predict the future? That's kind of an impossibility. And I'd like you to entertain a few possible futures with me. Sometimes when we talk about generative AI, there's this assumption that everything's going to go great, we're going to keep developing it. I said earlier, generative AI is currently the least capable it's ever going to be. And that's this techno-utopia, that we will march onward and upward to an amazing world. Robot butlers and 3-day work weeks and all of that wonderful stuff. But what if it's not that? What if we end up in a techno-dystopia? What if it's an episode of Black Mirror? What if the technology is used against us? What if we have some sort of collapse or catastrophe, some simplification? I'm aware that I'm saying this as someone who's flown all the way from Australia with the carbon footprint of that trip, but what if the world burns? In some climate change catastrophe scenario, are we really going to have ChatGPT? Should we be teaching students how to rub 2 sticks together rather than how to prompt engineer? When we think about authentic assessment, we need to not just think about the now, we need to think about the possible contradictory futures we may end up with. Rahul Kumar earlier yesterday added another one when we were talking about this talk. He said, what's the potential future for if education doesn't take generative AI seriously? Which I thought was really interesting. He said, what if the value of education just totally disappears because we don't take this problem or opportunity so seriously. We need to think about those futures as we go forward. When we're thinking about those, I think they're very helpful for us in thinking about, do we allow students to use generative AI and in what circumstances? Here I've got the aeroplane. When you're in the aeroplane, you have faith that the pilot can fly the aeroplane. Firstly, yes, tick. You have faith the pilot can fly the aeroplane with all the equipment working. Tick. You probably have faith the pilot can fly the aeroplane if all the equipment fails and they're having to do a sort of, you called the movie Airplane, we called it Flying High, sort of landing or something. And I find this quite illustrative for thinking about allowing and denying students access to things. Do we need students to use generative AI or all the flying equipment every time? Probably not. We probably want to develop their capability to do things without technology. The cognitive people talk about automaticity, like being really quick with things. When I go to the doctor, if they sing the foot bone's connected to the shin bone's, all that, that'd be terrifying. I don't want the doctor to do that. But they could just look it up in a book or sing the song. So there is a need for some sort of lower level automaticity. So if you teach the first level anatomy course where students have to memorize 1,000 things, I respect that. That's necessary. So we don't need students to be able to do it without generative AI every time, but sometimes. But there might be some outcomes we never want them to use generative AI on. We need to think very carefully about this. There are some ways we could possibly do this. We might be familiar with the term called scaffolding, which in education is where you provide greater supports earlier on and you slowly withdraw those supports. With my children, when they're learning to load the dishwasher, I kind of guide their hand in at first because they really don't stack things properly. You've seen kids load a dishwasher, it's horrible. So I guide their hand in. That's a great degree of scaffolding. Later on, I tell them about where to put it. Put it there. And later on, they're doing it all by themselves. That's the withdrawal of scaffolds. We could view generative AI as a scaffold that we withdraw throughout a course. Alternatively, we could take a reverse scaffolding approach. You may have had this already when learning to use a calculator. They made you learn those damn times tables in your earlier years of school, and they wouldn't let you use a calculator until you had really mastered them. But later on, when you do use the calculator, if you learn the times tables, you can spot when there's probably been a bit of a data entry mistake on the calculator because you have this sort of working understanding of how times tables work. That's a reverse scaffolding approach. We don't let people use the tools until they've demonstrated the outcomes themselves. Have a think about it with respect to your discipline and the sort of outcomes you assess. We want to be thinking about future cognitive challenges. What is going to be left for people in this world of generative artificial intelligence? One way to think about it is in terms of cognitive offloading. So cognitive offloading is any time you use a tool or a physical device to reduce the mental demands of a task. If you write something down so you don't have to remember it later, that's cognitive offloading. You now have a fancy term to take away. There's evidence of Socrates complaining about people cognitively offloading when he says, apparently he didn't write it down, that these people with this advent of writing, they're going to appear as if they know something, but really they just wrote it down or they read it, and that this is terrible for being able to understand what people are capable of. That's probably the first complaint about cognitive offloading, but we've had that through calculators, and now through to generative AI. One way to think about whether I want cognitive offloading or not might be to think about, is the thing that's being offloaded intrinsic to the task? So absolutely it can't be removed from the learning outcomes, or is it extraneous to the task? To use simpler words, is it what we're actually assessing, or is it the BS busy work that we set for students? If it's the BS busy work stuff, maybe we can allow them to use generative AI. But if it's intrinsic to the outcomes that are being assessed, we do not want to allow that. And that makes for a really scary thing, because if it's intrinsic to these outcomes and they can use generative AI to satisfy it, we need to start thinking about methods of assessment that we can be sure they haven't used it. In Australia, there's been some big work around interactive oral assessment. That's come out of Griffith University. They've got a whole big project on it with some resources. And I really think that that's probably where we need to go for a lot of outcomes, where we actually have a chat with people. And if you're saying to me, oh, Phil, I have massive class sizes and I couldn't possibly do that, I feel you, I hear you. That's real. We have those in Australia as well. Our classes go up to 2,000-3,000 people. But to say that we can never have a chat with a student across the course of their whole degree, I don't buy that. I think if we look across a whole degree program and say these are the moments where we really assess these key degree level outcomes, surely we live in a world where we can have a chat with a student at those moments to see, are they capable of the outcomes? I'd like to think we can do that. So this is cognitive offloading. And the final aspect of the framework is evaluative judgment, or future evaluative judgment. Now, evaluative judgment is making decisions about the quality of work, and it is a key outcome in the age of generative AI, because if you go to ChatGPT and say, give me an essay about the fall of the Roman Empire, it'll give you something. Is it any good? Who knows? If you have the capability to produce a really good essay about the fall of the Roman Empire, you can probably judge the quality of an essay about the fall of the Roman Empire that ChatGPT gives you. If you can't do it, you probably can't. We've done work on evaluative judgment, but there's earlier work on the Dunning-Kruger effect. Let's say I was a really not good president of a large Western democracy, and I thought I was a really good president of a large Western democracy. That's actually quite common to, if you're not very competent, think you're amazingly competent. That's Dunning-Kruger effect. Dunning-Kruger feeds into evaluative judgment, feeds into maybe if you were that hypothetical president, you wouldn't be that great at using ChatGPT to get an article about what makes for a good president. Mm-hmm. So evaluative judgment matters so much now. It matters more than it did before. And there's arguments in the literature that it may be like one of the last sort of capabilities that we as humans hold on to, especially when it comes to deciding not just what's good work, is this work good enough, but constituting the standards, coming up with the criteria, deciding what makes for good work. That might be one of the key things that's left for us. Now, I said future authentic assessment was no panacea, and I'm there, and please don't come away from this thinking Phil said people won't cheat if you make the assessment authentic. I will get so much hassling when I go back to Australia if I do that. But I do want to call out a chapter in this book here, Contract Cheating in Higher Education, which the lead editor was Sarah Lane Eaton there, where we talk about higher education assessment design. And we discuss what are the characteristics of assessment that might make people actually want to do the work. Because this might be a radical idea, but if we set students tasks they want to do, they're more likely to do them. In that chapter, we look into self-determination theory, which basically just says people are going to have intrinsic motivation if they feel connected to other people, if they feel autonomous, and if they feel like they're competent. And there's good literature that suggests people are less likely to take shortcuts like cheating if they have that intrinsic motivation from feeling connected to other people, from feeling like they've got some sort of autonomy, like maybe I get to choose the tasks I do, maybe there's some aspect of choice, and feeling competent. I get to make judgments about the quality of my work and I can see myself improving. So there is benefit to setting tasks students actually say that they would want to do. We need to maybe get our assessment and ask students, which of these tasks do you actually enjoy, and maybe how can we change the ones you don't enjoy to be things you do like. There was large-scale survey research done in Australia by Tracy Brettag and colleagues that showed that there were some types of assessment students said they were much more likely to pay someone else to do. And there were some they were much less likely to. High-stakes tasks, tasks with short turnaround times, students said, yeah, I'm much more likely to get someone else to do that. Lower stakes tasks, reflective tasks, where I get to reflect on the quality of my work and my experience, they were less likely to do. They were a bit of a flag with reflection. My favourite papers about reflection are called Faking It or Hating It, because people do fake reflective practice. And they liked it if you said that you cried. Because people do that. We lie so much in reflection. I think you're all lovely people, but I reckon most people in this room have probably embellished a reflection at some stage. It's kind of built into our culture. We have some hero's journey in reflective pieces. So those students say they'd like to do reflection and they'd be less likely to cheat it. There's other types of integrity beyond just contract cheating or getting ChatGPT to do it. There's actually being truthful. Now, I'm going to give a little plug to a resource. This is from our research centre, the Centre for Research and Assessment and Digital Learning. We got together and worked through generative artificial intelligence and its impacts on assessment. And Dori, the link is still down there. We produced this 3-page guide which talks about how we can take the principles of good assessment and enact them in this world of generative AI, and how we can adapt current assessment practices, the thing we do, to account for generative AI. It synthesises research from 5 books that our team has produced into really actionable things. And it's under a Creative Commons attribution license, which means you can get it, you can mess with it, you can copy paste it, you can rework it, you can put it on your university website, and all you've got to do is say, originally this thing or parts of this thing came from that document. So if you want a resource that you can use and rebrand and all that, that's the one. So 3 things. Generative AI can do heaps of what we currently get students to do. We probably can't, and we probably shouldn't try to ban it, because assessment needs to prepare students for their future, not for our past. Thank you so much.
Thanks so much, Phil. That was an excellent talk. And before we start the Q&A, I'd like to remind those of you on the live stream to submit your questions to workland@ucalgary.ca. That's WERKLUND@ucalgary.ca. For those of you in the room, please put up your hands, and one of us will come to you with a microphone. There's also a standing microphone there if you prefer to stand up and walk to the microphone. We are anticipating quite a few questions. We'll get through as many as we can. So let's start with the questions. I also have them. I'm monitoring the online questions here through Teams. Okay, I have that open from our team here. Okay. Questions, comments in the room? Yeah, can we get Sarusha mic? Mm-hmm. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Phil. My question is about evaluative judgment. You, drawing from that notion, do you think that we should be assessing our students' prompt engineering capabilities or abilities?
That's a really great question. So prompt engineering being our interactions that we have with ChatGPT or some other generative artificial intelligence, and our ability to get really good results out of that. I mean, I think we probably should. I think it's a skill set that's going to date very quickly. So learning how to do, in first year of university, how to do really great prompts for the current edition of ChatGPT, I think that's going to be wildly different by the end. But I think the fundamental ideas of sort of what people are calling a critical AI literacy or a critical digital literacy would include understandings of how to get a really good prompt in there. I think there's how to do a good prompt, but I'd really want to judge like a whole session people have. So they make a request and it's not good enough, and then they make another request and that's better. And you can see how they're doing those evaluative judgments of the outputs and the sort of factors of the outputs that aren't good enough for them. So I'd love to set a task like have a ChatGPT session and annotate the reasons why you made these sort of comments. Tell me why. Tell me what you thought of the quality of it. There's a long history of people setting tasks to develop evaluative judgment. David Carlis is an author who does this, where students get exemplars of good quality work or bad quality work, and in class they have to annotate them and write about them and judge them, because it's in the doing that we develop our evaluative judgment.
Okay, we did have a question come in online, and it's asking you, Phil, are there any suggestions for ways we could leverage artificial intelligence as an instructional or learning tool, or to provide experiences that might support future science teachers in their practice?
Ooh, that's really interesting. So, I haven't gone there on the instructional side of things so much, but there certainly are people out there looking at ChatGPT sort of like an old intelligent tutoring system. That's a body of work that people really tried to develop these systems that would build a model of understanding what the student's capable of and present them with harder and harder work that was within their capability. I think that body of work would probably be a good link to that. With the science teachers in particular, I don't know enough about the domain of science teaching, but I do know that there are people, I'm thinking of a Deakin colleague, John Cripps Clark, who's done a lot about teaching online science students and try to find ways to bring those face-to-face lab type tasks into a computer-mediated environment. There are some aspects of it that's really difficult and we'll probably always need the hands-on with the real stuff. But yeah, ChatGPT can probably do an okay job at some of those things.
And just for anybody who didn't catch the name, Cripps?
John Cripps Clark.
Clark, hyphenated last name?
Yes, I think so.
Yeah, John Cripps Clark. Thanks for that. Yeah. Other questions from in the room or comments? I have a question for you, and that's around, we've heard a lot about ChatGPT and its ability to make up things. Some people call it hallucinations, other people call it confabulation. No one has a crystal ball, but we sort of, where do you think we are now? And say by the start of our next academic year, which might be September, what do you think we should be paying attention to with regards to confabulation?
Oh, that's a great question. I think we're just going to see a lot less of it. So at the moment, people say things like, you can tell it's ChatGPT because the references are made up. Firstly, people have been making up references for a long time. It's a common... I know!
What? Oh my goodness.
I make up these references to this Sarah Eaton character that she hasn't
written. Who knows who that is?
You'd be amazed, all the papers. That's actually really funny. If you make up a reference, and then I wonder if there'd be a way to like bomb someone's Google Scholar profile. There are some blogs that get indexed by Google Scholar where you can just have a blog, you can put something up under the name of Sarah Eaton, and I could write a blog post about why I think fart jokes are really funny. And it would like
people
come
know
up
I
on
would
your...
never write that blog post.
Oh, so it's, okay.
Okay.
All right, but anyway, I think we're going to see less of the making up of references. I think that's going to be one that'll disappear off into the ether. I think we're going to see much more contemporary material. I wonder if we're going to see more absorption of what goes in from the prompts, learning from the prompts beyond just the session that we're having. And I think we're going to see more specialised ChatGPT instances that know a whole bunch of other things. So a university library might have a specialised one that indexes that university's online data set that includes some proprietary sources that regular ChatGPT doesn't know about.
Okay, that's good, thanks. Okay, we have another question from online here. This reader, wow, okay, I need new glasses. All right, my arm's not long enough. This person is interested in how AI can generate websites and blogs. We just talked about this. And so many of the authentic, quote unquote, assessments that this person's used in the past. Just wondering about how to open that out to new ways to doing this work. Wondering about how to use, how to measure and evaluate cognitive offloading, especially in the first year composition. There's a lot there.
It's a big question. So I have a mate back in Australia who used to do copywriting. This copywriting would end up on websites. I think it was search engine optimization type copywriting, so the real blah blah stuff that just aims to increase the rank on Google search or whatever. And he doesn't do that anymore because he uses ChatGPT. He used to use a tool called Jasper a few years back. And it's kind of evolved, and now he's leading a team of people using ChatGPT. So the authentic professional practice of blog writing in some domains is to not write blogs. It's to use ChatGPT and to massage it and massage the outputs. We then need to ask ourselves, is the ability to write a blog post really the outcome that we're after, in which case this is an outcome that is now done by technology? Or is the outcome that we're trying to assess some other thing and we just chose the form of a blog post because that was of interest? We need to really go to those learning outcomes and try and understand that. If we desperately need people to be able to write a blog all by themselves and definitely not use ChatGPT, we're probably in the environment where we have a proctored blog post writing exam, which kind of mixes the trendy, authentic assessment with the old school sitting in an exam hall.
Okay, thanks for that. Other questions in the room? Yes, Rahul, go ahead. You can bring the mic to you.
Thank you for the presentation, Phil. I appreciate it. So if the call for altering assessments is taken up seriously, and the technology is going to continue to evolve, as in generative AI is going to get better in capability and quality and all the rest of it, when do we stop, and how do we keep our assessment strategies relevant given the time frames of courses, terms, programs, and so on and so forth? Any thoughts on that?
That's a great question. So we've done a lot of projects on how people do the work of assessment change. And I can say in Australia, and from what I've learned in Canada, it's similar here, if you want to change assessment tasks in a major way, that can sometimes come with a lot of paperwork and a lot of notifying different people and going through committees and all of that. So it can be very, very slow. I could be glib and say we find future-proof tasks that are going to stay future-proof, but I don't know if such tasks actually exist. So I think we probably want to look zooming out at a degree program and trying to identify moments where it really matters if people can do what we say they can do. This is called programmatic assessment in some contexts, where you really map the assessment up to those degree level outcomes and you try and say this is the task that really matters. And we try and go for those moments with some things that are resource intensive, yes, but we have a high confidence that they're more secure. Those are largely invigilated tasks. Now, I think we can do a lot less invigilated or proctored tasks than we currently do. If you're in a context where you have a proctored exam at the end of every course, unit, module thingy, I think that's too much. We want to grab our resourcing that we're using on that, because exams cost a lot of money, the exam hall and all of that. We want to grab that resourcing and really think strategically about it. And then in the other moments, maybe we say we're going to be a bit more okay about using ChatGPT or Midjourney or DALL-E or whatever. Maybe we say these are our key assessment of learning moments, and these are our assessment for learning moments, and we view generative AI as a friend in assessment for learning.
Thank you. Okay, we've had another question come in from online. We'll do online and then go to the back. So this person's saying, many university leaders have expressed the opinion that generative AI will replace or at least hurt contract cheating providers. Do you have any thoughts on this? Anecdotally, we've already seen evidence that contract cheating providers are themselves using generative AI to produce work for students. Will it just widen their profit margins? Big question mark.
So this is a great question, and it's so great that I asked Thomas Lancaster, who's a real expert in contract cheating. He's one of the people who coined the term. I asked him this question last week because he's published a lot about the labour market behind contract cheating. And yeah, he said they are using it, which is true. my view is that it's going to dent it, but contract cheating, authentic, by hand, bespoke, farm-to-table contract cheating is going to exist.
Did you just say
farm-to-table
farm-to-table
contract
cheating?
Yeah.
Okay, that's a new term for most of us in the room. Did
Yeah.
you just make it up?
I made it up.
Okay, good enough. Yeah, okay.
I was trying to come up with, there's that thing that like hipsters are into, which is like authenticity in that sort of sense. And they're real authentic, like there's someone's heart and soul that you've paid for inside of this contract cheating piece of work. I think that's going to exist probably forever, but it's going to shift into being more of an elite thing. I think we're going to see bespoke generative AIs around academic cheating and homework help,
Homework help, yeah.
It's not cheating, it's
It's not
Chegg.
cheating, yeah.
That could be their slogan. It's not cheating, it's Chegg.
Nobody tweet that, please. Nobody tweet that.
Yeah, so I think we're always going to have it, but it's going to be something the elite have and the rest of us just have generative AI.
Okay, thank you. We had a question at the back.
Yeah, it's an interesting lead up. I was at an industry conference last week, and one of the comments that came out of it was talking around AI is that at least in the short term, AI won't replace many people, or you won't lose your job to AI. You'll lose your job to someone who knows how to harness AI. So thinking about that, how do we get our students to create higher level thinking tasks through the use of AI to actually support them and help them for that world that they're going to be in? Because it will obviously not just be in our academic world, it'll be out in industry as well.
Yeah, I think that's a great question. I love that line. I've heard it in a few places. And I think it's probably the truth. If we keep setting tasks that are of the same degree of challenge that we've always set, higher education is going to get so much easier because the tools are so much greater. We were complaining today about how if you go back like 50 years ago and look at the quality of work that academics used to produce, they used to write these kind of rambling, unreferenced articles, and they'd write like one of them every few years, and that was their research output.
That sounds great.
Oh, totally. That would, I mean, in some contexts, that wouldn't get you into a PhD program, let alone a professorship. So we need to raise the standard. If we're going to say you can use these tools, the standard needs to raise significantly. We need to look at, in the field of practice, what does that look like? What sort of work is being outsourced? Is it that the cognitively challenging stuff is the only stuff that's left? If so, that's where we want to focus our education and assessment after we've gotten people to the point where they can do the other stuff. Is it that people are going to be doing more? If so, maybe we focus on improving our students' capability to actually do more work. It's probably going to exist differently in the different disciplines. Some disciplines have had a while to come to terms with these sorts of issues. Engineering has had automated algebra solvers for a while. Accounting has had their own sort of AI systems, but some other professions are just coming to terms with this now.
We have a related question from online. This person is saying, I feel like most traditional post-secondary institutions are still assessing in the past and are often the last piece of the educational scaffold to change methodology. Do you see a shift happening at the post-secondary level towards more future-forward assessments? Question mark.
Yeah, this is a really good one. So we did a large-scale project at Australian universities on assessment design decisions. That was the name of the project. I remember one of the specific courses that we looked at had the same assessment since the university was founded, and this was not a young university. And everyone had respected the people that had come before them, and they'd done those tasks again and again. I don't think those tasks would have withstood the pandemic. I think that has been a really big mobilising, shifting, changing force. Our university doesn't do pen and paper exams anymore. We just don't do them. They don't exist. University of 70,000 students, we don't do pen and paper exams. I think generative AI is also going to really shake things up. I think it might be Tracy Brethag who who used to say something like, never waste a good crisis. Because, in Australia we had some massive contract cheating scandals that Tracy and colleagues were able to really latch onto to say, well, here's our opportunity, let's change things up. And she was very successful in doing that. And I think we can do that with this generative AI challenge.
Thanks. And I see Bibek has a question. We've got one over here. Okay, Beatrice, and then Bibek. Yeah.
So your presentation comes at the right time with enlightening ideas, so thank you for that. And building from these recommendations that you just shared with us, I wonder how they could be infused into assessment and academic integrity policy. What, in your opinion, would be the key elements that institutions should include in this kind of policy?
Great, thank you. So the first thing is we specify all of these outcomes for students, and we don't specify what supports are allowed to be used when they're demonstrating these outcomes. We then don't specify what supports were used when certifying these outcomes, when giving someone a degree. So unlike with the pilot training where it's ticked off, they can fly the plane with the instruments or without them, we just say people are capable of doing things. I think that's a really big opportunity for policy to say, when certifying outcomes and assessing outcomes, specify the allowed supports, which is going to include generative AI, which might include outsourcing to another person. Who knows? But we really need to be clearer in specifying that. Academic integrity policy is an interesting one. We need to decide where generative AI sits. Is it an academic integrity issue? Is it an assessment issue? There's all sorts of definitions of academic integrity or not. Some are values-based. How do values connect to this? Some are much more assessment-focused, in which case it's about specifying the outcomes and the supports. Thanks.
Thank you, Phil, for this very insightful talk and question answer. And this is a question from student perspective. What could be the next step that students should be prepared for authentic assessment in the era of generative AI?
Sorry, could you repeat just the last part of that?
What could be the next steps that students should be prepared for authentic assessment in the era of generative AI?
Ooh, so how should students be prepared for the age of generative AI and authentic assessment? And I think it's our responsibility to prepare them for that. So I think learning to use the tools, developing that sort of critical AI literacy is really important. Some students are going to come to us with some of that from the school sector as well. We need to explore, like, how does this work in the school sector? And then I think part of what we need to do in authentic assessment is to communicate the authenticity of the assessment. Authenticity is in the eye of the beholder, and if the student doesn't believe the task to be authentic, is it actually authentic? I know of some educators who did an assessment task with students that involved sort of walking through a site and making observations. This was in environmental science. To these educators, this was a very authentic task, and the students did not believe it to be authentic. So to them, it just wasn't. So there's a bit of sort of learning. And maybe if we're saying that this exists into the future, it's probably learning and speculating about where's my discipline going.
Okay, we have another question online here. And it's this question concerns cognitive offloading, one of your specialties. It's when it comes to written work and developing written communication skills, what do you think about using generative AI to help with idea generating, to springboard from cognitive offloading? There's more. And she said, as she's noted in the chat on Zoom, one idea that they were thinking about was having students use generative AI to come up with a counter argument to their stance on a topic in a reading or an article, find a persuasive argument. And then they were saying ChatGPT is very superficial at the moment, so students can use illicit AI to find evidence, to integrate it into a counter argument. From there, students can be required in an invigilated environment to refute or write a rebuttal.
Oh, I love it. This is a great example of a task. I think it raises for me, firstly, that we often obsess about the final written form of the work as the thing that holds integrity, or that is the thing that we assess, rather than the stages towards that. We often don't do a lot of process assessment, we just do a lot of final product assessment. It's arguable whether the greater sin is getting ChatGPT to write work that you have structured and told it to write, or asking ChatGPT for the ideas that you then go away and write. To me, that's probably the greater evil in a lot of contexts, but I don't think there's consensus view on that, because that's the intellectual work. The rest is expression. It depends on what the outcomes are, of course. If the outcomes are around coming up with the ideas, and you get ChatGPT to come up with the ideas that you write yourself, that's not you demonstrating the outcomes. With respect to this specific task, one thing I really like is that it's got a mixture of things that students are doing on their own and perhaps using illicit AI, not illicit AI, which I think was the, because that's a tool, illicit AI.
Yep.
It's a bad pun.
Yeah,
from
I
me.
think that's what's being referenced.
Yeah. I made a bad pun about illicit AI.
I see, okay.
When you've got to explain a joke, it's a bad joke.
It's a handler assured, we would say in our house.
But I like this approach because it's got stages in there and it's got a supervised component to it. If I had my other hat on, like when I'm in Australia, a lot of my work is feedback research. I research how people learn to deal with feedback. I'd use that sort of staged process as opportunities for feedback and dialogue. The other thing about feedback dialogues are they can be a great way to understand if students have done the work themselves.
Yeah, thank you. Other questions in the room? Okay, one of the things I've noticed about you, Phil,
over here.
Another question here? Go ahead. Yeah, and then I'll talk about what I've noticed about you. It'll
Gosh.
be fun. It'll be fun.
Hi, I work in healthcare education, and I find anytime AI comes up in conversation, understandably because we have humans on the other end of our degree, it's impossible to divorce the morality and ethics anytime we're having discussions around AI. So I find from a leadership perspective, we get stuck because we know it's happening. Should the students be doing it? We don't need to get into that, but I'm curious as to how you navigate this, if you have tips or tools to kind of drive the conversation, kind of setting aside that morality piece.
Thank you so much. That's a great question. So, I mean, there is some validity to the morality argument. There's research that medical doctors who had more academic integrity violations in their studies go on to have more professional integrity problems. So the two are connected. These aren't disconnected things. I think sometimes the academic in academic integrity makes it feel very inauthentic, something that's just a thing for the academy. Integrity's for everywhere. But the pragmatist in me says that we also need to focus on the really immediate stuff around assessment and validity. Within health professions education, validity is even more of a God term than it is in education in general. There are articles about validity as a God term in health professions education. So I'd really be taking the validity line, saying this is about us being able to be sure that our graduates are capable of what they're capable of. Medical schools invest inordinate amounts of money in the spooky art of psychometrics and all sorts of crazy stuff. Those sort of people should care so much about validity, and this is part of it. I think it was Civic, C-I-Z-E-K, who wrote about sort of we need to view cheating through a validity sort of angle, and yeah, it removes the morals out of it, which you may struggle because no one wants an evil doctor. What do you notice, Sarah?
Well, I can't get there yet. There's another question.
All right.
Sorry, you're going to have to wait.
Making me sweat.
This question from online is that at their institution, they've worked a lot with academics who are still in the mindset of detecting or banning artificial intelligence and are resistant to rethinking assessment design. So what strategies have worked for you and your colleagues at Deakin or not worked? Keen to hear about the challenges too.
So I'd say the thing that didn't work is the thing that didn't work for anyone, which is it doesn't know about 2023. It lasted hardly any time. I think the Jason Lodge and colleagues piece is probably a really good go-to for some specifics of like what seemed to work in Australia and elsewhere. Because they really paint the ban and detect as something that only just has a slight chance of working in the short term and will not work in the long term. Challenging people to provide evidence that what I call assessment security approaches work can work sometimes, or it can get their backs up and they hate you. But I would really be saying, where is the evidence that this detection approach works, that this detection approach is compatible with our policy that we have here? I love a phrase that Kath Ellis tweeted about a month ago of how the whole generative AI thing makes us need to shift from trying to detect cheating to trying to evidence learning. Because we can't. There's so many ways to fabricate and cheat and get Gen AI to do it and all of that now. Trying to detect that stuff is almost a lost battle. We need to rethink about, how can I actually see that students have learned? How can I get that really good evidence? That's the conversation we need to have.
That's the next conversation. Okay, now I can get to the thing I've noticed about you. It's this. No, you're really good about being super respectful. So the question came in from the science teacher, and you said you weren't a science teacher. I've heard you say in other contexts, you're not an academic integrity guy. I disagree, but that's okay. But you're good at what we would call sort of staying in your lane. So I'm not going to ask you about what you think, K-12 teachers should do broadly, because you'll tell me you're not a K-12 teacher. But also, I'm going to reframe this. So as a parent with children, what do you want your children's teachers to know? And I'm asking because we're a school of education.
All right.
What do you want your children's teachers to know?
Now, prior to having children of my own, one of my most loathed phrases began with, as a parent. So as an education academic, that has always, but now that I am a parent, I love to engage me in some as a parent talk. Okay, I guess I'd love them to firstly know my children are too young to use generative AI, because things like ChatGPT have an age limit, so please don't let them use it. I'd love them to work with my kids around the sort of ethics and the bias and the lack of truthiness. Truthiness is a word. When I was in America for the first time in 2008, I switched on the TV and it was Fox News, and they literally used the word truthiness. I was like, what is this country? But I want my kids to think about that. As a parent, one of the things of two young boys, one of the things that worries me so much is the way that the internet and technology are being used to radicalise young boys into some really unhealthy, racist, misogynistic crap. And I worry that these large language models that are claimed to just reflect society and the data that they're trained on will reflect some of the worst in society to my boys. I worry that they're going to grow up on an algorithmic diet of things that are going to change them in bad ways. So I'd love my kids' teachers to really work with them on that.
Well, that sounds like a good place to help us wrap up. We have been privileged to have you here today, as well as the other participants in our research symposium. Thanks to the generosity of SSHRC, University of Calgary International Research Workshop Partner Grant, the Workland School of Education, the University of Calgary Teaching and Learning Grant, Deakin University, Brock University, Toronto Metropolitan University, and the University of Saskatchewan. It's because of that we've been able to have our research participants here and to have you here as well. Everyone, Phil Dawson.